Welcome back, everybody, to the Marketing Rules podcast, and it's my pleasure to be joined today by Darshan Mehta. Darshan, it's a pleasure to have you on. As I said, I'm going to guess that kind of the majority of our audience may never have heard of you, but hopefully they'll be kind of gripped by the time we finish today's recording. But if you could give us a little bit about your background, and I know you've written a few kind of books and things like that, so give us a bit of a potted history.
Sure, it's great to be here. Thanks, James. I've been in the marketing, advertising, branding area for about 20 some years. And I recently wrote a book called Getting to AHA, Why Today's Insights Are Tomorrow's Facts. Because if you think about it, our world is basically based on insights that someone had at one point to develop a lot of the products and services that we use now. An easy example for all of us to identify was it wasn't that long ago that most of us didn't carry smartphones with us. And basically, since the late 2000s, now everybody's carrying a basic computer in their pocket to basically manage and run our lives on a daily basis. So, but at some point, that was an insight that someone had, then these are products that we basically start using. So if you can gain these insights ahead of time, you can gain a competitive advantage.
I think about this quite a lot, to be honest, that the fact that we've got this pocket, almost supercomputer, all right, just kind of wandering around with you, that's got, more computing power than it easily took to put men on the moon. Always kind of amazes me that there is this kind of just literally thing that you've got the world at your fingertips. It's something we completely kind of take for granted these days.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, I think the phone is probably within each person's proximity about 5 to 10 feet at about 24/7, hours. I mean, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, more so than your significant other or spouse. And it's something that we've all kind of come to rely on and use on a regular basis.
I read some interesting statistics around kind of mobile phone usage, especially with different kind of generations, and that kind of younger generations, the fifth or sixth thing they do on a smartphone is make a phone call. There's every other thing you can do on a smartphone is used apart from actually kind of making a phone call on it anymore, which is crazy. It's interesting to do, and actually is an interesting kind of marketing kind of strategy as well, right? If you know that people have kind of got these things in their pockets, but they're not using them to make phone calls, then there's a tactic behind that, which we will kind of get onto. We'll talk about the kind of marketing strategies and how they've evolved and how we kind of stay on top of them. But you've mentioned a couple of times about around kind of insights. So for the listeners, can you kind of define what you consider as an insight, right? Because it might be slightly different. We might all have slightly different kind of things that we understand it to be. So let's start with defining it, and then we'll talk about how we can use them.
Sure. I mean, I think people do use insights in a varying degree. I would say insights are more than facts or observations. They're actually a combination of understanding societal trends, technological trends, as well as facts and observations, kind of putting them all together to make a succinct thought that helps you have a deeper understanding of what's really driving something, driving a behavior, a purchase decision, or whatever. Let me give you an example. I think one of the best people who give insights are really good comedians. They're the ones that basically take something from over here, put it together, and articulate it in a way that makes you say, oh my God, I never thought of that, but that is so true. So it kind of gets at a core truth, but it's articulated in a way that you had not maybe thought about. And so what you're trying to do in many ways when you're searching for these insights, you're trying to get to that aha moment, you're trying to tap into what people think and feel, their subconscious thoughts and feelings, because 95% of what we do or make decisions are based on our subconscious. And so you're trying to tap into that. And if you can articulate that deeper insight or motivator, then that's going to help you quite a bit.
So it could be almost kind of two disparate kind of events, situations, facts, whatever you kind of call that. It takes someone then to make the connection that there is a relationship between these things, and that obviously that's the insight has then been kind of created at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah. So from a business standpoint, let's take startup businesses. A lot of people who listen to the podcast are kind of SME sized businesses. Majority of them are in the staffing and HR space, but we kind of get tech providers and things like that listening as well. But if you are a startup, how do you kind of use these insights to grow your business?
One of the best ways a startup can use insights is really to get to product market fit sooner and much more alignment of the two. Often we as entrepreneurs come up with a product or idea based on a pain point we've had or experienced, and then you want to take that idea to market, which is great. But sometimes, when you actually talk to the marketplace, you'll find certain tweaks or things that need to just be modified slightly that can make a big difference. And if you really think about it, it's not just for startups, but even established businesses. There are basically two ways you can make business decisions. One, you can stab in the dark, or you can make them based on information you've actually garnered and tapped into from your customers so that you have a much more informed decision. And either way, the marketplace is going to speak to you and give you feedback. And your choice is really, do you want to listen sooner or do you want to listen later?
And if you're a startup, I suppose the question that comes to me is that one, you're probably resource light, time light. The people in the business are probably wearing all kinds of different hats to do all different types of things in business. How does a business, a startup business, kind of get their head around this and find the time and the kind of resources to kind of look into this? I'm sure you're going to say, well, you would deal with that before you start up, but a lot of businesses don't do that, right? They just kind of like, we've got a great idea, we want to do this, let's crack on, and suddenly they get into selling mode, and then everything else kind of goes out the window at that point.
Yeah, I would encourage. I mean, as basic as just having interviews or having conversations with your potential customers. And then if you want to take it to the next level up, you can actually engage in focus groups. You can do online focus groups with our platform, or you can also do in-person focus groups, which tend to be a little bit more expensive, but that's doable. And then, of course, later on, once you have better insights into what your customers think and feel, if you find you want to actually extrapolate that to the population, then you can do surveys. But at the core of it, I would absolutely start with having engaging conversations. And the purpose of these conversations is not to sell the customers. It's actually tap into what they think and feel and how likely are they to buy your product or service. And if they're not likely to buy, what would it be needed to change, alter, or fix it so that maybe they would consider buying your product or service?
And so let's assume you're a startup. You've kind of gone past this kind of growth. You kind of this initial growth phase. You're into finding funding, etc. For you're then kind of a couple of years in. How does this then kind of play out once you're kind of 3, 4, 5, kind of 6 years into your business?
Well, this process is an ongoing process with your customers. I mean, their needs change, things change, and insights are always going to be coming forward as a result of technological advances, societal, cultural trends. For example, before 2019, no one was really thinking about the pandemic or how that might influence our purchase decisions. But post-pandemic, it's changed a lot in terms of how people are buying, what they're buying, and where they're putting their time and money into. And that was a big change. And that's something so it's a constant evolving conversation to tap in these insights. However, let's say you have a successful product. The other thing you want to maybe shift towards, once you've gotten a product market fit, is to maybe explore more of ways. What are some existing pain points that maybe you can address that no one else is addressing? So these kind of conversations, focus groups, things that can actually lead to product innovation. Again, you can guess in the dark, or you can go along with what your customers are telling them and kind of evolve with them and change with them, and improve your product or your experience. For example, it doesn't necessarily have to just be the product; it can be the buying experience that needs to be enhanced, and that can be worked on as well. So this is an ongoing conversation, and it's based on your needs, your budget, and your time frame. But it's not something you just do once and then you stop doing it.
And so, is this something that is driven from the top? You've kind of got, subject matter experts within the business, or you would just rely on technology to kind of to draw in these insights and gain these insights. What is there one size fits all? How would you kind of tell us how you would go about that?
I think when you have support from the top, it's going to go much better all around. One, you might get budget, you'll get time, and you'll get buy-in, and it's something that should come from the top. And if you think about it, all we're really talking about is some people call it market research, but in reality, it's as simple as structured curiosity. And what you're trying to do is have these conversations so you can tap into what people think and feel. And that's what's going to give you a head start and these insights so you can actually gain a competitive advantage from your competitors. And so let me give you a simple example. Airbnb, when they first started out, they were told to go out and talk to the customers. They were getting some traction, but not in all markets. And the market that they seemed to be doing somewhat well was in New York. And so they decided they flew it to New York, actually sit down at the kitchen table with many customers, and they quickly realized one of the big problems was a lot of these people just didn't know how to take good quality pictures of their homes. So they actually took better pictures, and within a week, and they trained them how to take better pictures. Within a week, the sales doubled, and that was a big difference in the success and trajectory of the company once they did that, which was actually having conversations with their customers and learning what could make a difference. And again, that didn't take a lot of time. I mean, a lot of money, but it did take some time to delve into it. Once they did that, it really changed the trajectory of their sales.
Yeah, that's a great example. How something kind of quite visual and kind of just tweaking around the edges is can kind of really turn things around. Let's move on to one of my kind of favorite subjects, which is kind of marketing strategy, and how that then kind of flows on from the kind of insights you gain. So, marketing strategy, especially for smaller businesses and startups, is probably something that is secondary in their kind of list of things that when they're kind of getting up. But just tell me, from the work you've done and maybe some examples, the importance of getting that kind of strategy right, or at least working on it right from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, one way or another, you're going to end up with a strategy, whether you design it or the market kind of dictates it for you, right? And the thing is you can spend a lot of time and a lot of money up front by guessing and then doing it, and your marketplace is going to speak to you. Or you can actually do some trial balloons, as I say, and see what's going on before you spend the big portion of your time and your budget to actually see if this strategy is going to take hold. And again, it's going back to the thing we talked about earlier. Your choice is really not whether you're going to have a strategy or not. It's you want to do it sooner or later by listening to the customers. So it's a much more likelihood to be a successful strategy when you do implement it.
And I know you from other conversations and kind of podcasts and the book, there's marketing strategies are changing constantly, right? And no more so over the last kind of couple of years, as you already mentioned. There's things like the pandemic and whatever else kind of goes on in the world means you need to adapt pretty quickly. So how can businesses adapt? In a ever changing and faster changing kind of world.
Sure. I think the one thing is definitely increase your level of curiosity and wanting to observe as well as absorb information that's out there. For example, when you read about the pandemic, that more and more people were spending time at home. Many of them couldn't go to the office, and as a result, that was likely going to be a situation going to cause people to spend more money on their home to make it more comfortable for work as well as a personal life. And chances are they're going to be spending more money on home offices, things like that. So these are the kind of things, like I said, you need to understand societal change, technological changes that are going to start impacting decision making and behavior. And I think the other thing you can realize is, as a result of what's been happening in really hyper competition, but also the pandemic, people are no longer just buying products; they're buying experiences. They're buying an experience from the very beginning when they see you interact with your product and service, and all the way through post purchase. And that's a big part of decision making now, as well as referrals. So these are all things you kind of need to look at. So increase your level of curiosity, read as many things you can to understand a sense of where societal trends, things are going, and then see how that will impact you. And then again, have those conversations with your customers and see from them how these things are impacting the way they buy products or services, and ultimately the decision making they're doing.
So these kind of ongoing conversations with your customers, you mentioned that they need to be kind of structured. How does that work? Is that as simple as a couple of kind of phone, questions you need to ask every time you speak to them on the phone or when you meet them? Is it as formal as you mentioned as surveys? Kind of how far do you need to go? What's the spectrum we need to be looking at there?
It depends on your needs, but I think let me just break it down. There's basically two ways to do kind of research. One is what we call qualitative, and the other is quantitative. And the benefits of qualitative, it allows you to have real conversations and allows you to have them be open ended. And what you're trying to do is go deeper and deeper on a particular topic or subject. For example, when you're at a cocktail party, you're meeting a few people, and you start talking about a topic, and everyone's feeding off of each other, going deeper and deeper into the topic, and you're all having a very engaging conversation. That's what you're trying to recreate in a focus group. And one of the benefits of doing it as a group is when you have like-minded people talking about a topic, these are things that trying to tap into what they think and feel in their subconscious. But as you're talking about something, James, and I am, then I might feed off of what you're saying. Say, oh, that's really interesting what you said. I never thought of it, and that's how it makes me feel. And then you can feed off of that, and that's the benefit of that kind of conversation. But again, you can also have them
Mm-hmm.
one-on-one. And then once you have a better understanding of what people are thinking and feeling, then you might want to think about doing a survey so you can say, like, I have a pretty good sense what people are telling me. I want to now know what percentage of my audience actually feels this way. Is it 20%, 50%, or 70%? And, there's many different ways you're going to get feedback nowadays. You're going to get feedback by having conversations. You're going to get feedback by comments and referrals that are on the internet through your social channels. So there's many different ways to collect and gather that information. But what I'm talking about is behavior that is recorded in terms of online purchase and stuff, that tells you what they've actually done. But the benefit of if you go prior to that and do these conversations, you'll understand the context upon which that decision was made. In other words, what drove them to buy or not buy that product? What drove them to look at for other alternatives? Is it based on price, the experience, and so on? And that's the kind of insight that's going to give you better context for all the analytics that we're generating online through all the different methods.
Yeah, the kind of context instead of content. The context is king, right? It's understanding that kind of that micro detail. Yeah, I mean that makes complete sense. A couple of times also you've mentioned customer experience and customer centric, kind of the importance of these terms. So let's kind of let's talk about that for a little bit. So how important is it to be more kind of customer centric?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, you exist because your customer is willing to buy your product or service. I'll give you an excellent example of Gillette razors. That their innovations were adding new blades to their cartridges. Went from two blades to three to four to five, and I'm not even sure what up to six or seven. But what happened was that was the innovation. But what they neglected to keep an eye on was the customer experience. So as these blades increase, the price of the cartridges increase as well, to the point that at least in the U.S., I'm not sure in other countries, but in order to go buy them at the store, you had to go to the clerk and have them unlock the cabinet to get them for you, and that took away from the buying experience. So up comes this upstart that basically says, I want to change the buying experience and make it subscription based because you're going to need these on a regular basis. And they basically took on and was very successful with, Gillette that had 75 to 80% of the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a kind of interesting kind of position of a disruptor coming into that market and really kind of shaking it up. For the smaller businesses though, who might not be on the kind of size of the kind of Gillette, how do we go about kind of improving that kind of customer experience? And let's, I'm thinking with kind of the audience session today, it is around, interaction on the website, for instance. What would be some of your kind of tips to kind of build a better customer experience online for a smaller business?
Sure, but in fact, if you go back to the Gillette example, actually, it was Gillette that was the industry leader, but it was a startup that actually interrupted it. And who would have thought that, if I came up to you and say, "Hey, James, I'm going to enter the shaver business with new cartridges and blades," you probably would say, "Are you crazy?" I mean, there's a big company that owns the marketplace, but they focus on the experience, and that made a huge difference. So I think even for smaller players, there's many different opportunities to enhance the customer experience. And that's from the time they actually find out about you to the time they interact with you and your front line of employees. They can all make a difference. And I think you should look for opportunities to enhance that experience. What is it people are looking for to make it easier, more convenient, maybe less expensive? But more than anything, You want to see if there's a way you can make an emotional connection with your customers. And if you can do that, that's going to exponentially increase your ability to interact, but also the likelihood that they're going to recommend you to their friends and families and their network.
Yeah, I can see this being a little easier with a product, for instance. When it comes to a service, as I said, a lot of the kind of listeners are in the kind of HR and staffing space. That might be a bit more kind of difficult because the buying process is slightly kind of is different. So, is there anything that is specific to kind of services that you would suggest when it comes to customer experience?
Sure, if you think about basically even hospitality, going to hotels and stuff. If you go to a hotel where they don't remember your name and they're not personalized and not really taking care of you, that makes a big difference. Whereas you go to some other hotel where they say, "Hey, hello, James, good to see you again. Welcome back. Would you like to have your feather pillows again?" So in other words, there's opportunities not in just product but also service as well. And ultimately, it comes down to really having a good understanding of your customer. And nowadays, with being able to capture so much information, you can have these things in a database that you can capture unique, special things that people like. So that way they feel like, hey, they're special, they're having a great experience, and that's something that they're going to want to come back to, even with their friends and family. So they say, hey, look, you're going to know that when you walk up to the hotel, they're going to say your name, James. They're going to talk to you, and it's going to make you feel good as well as with your friends and family when you bring them as well.
Yeah, that kind of personalization, I think, is and somehow the kind of getting the technology and kind of to kind of play a part in that as well. I think is pretty important, as you've already mentioned, kind of capturing that in a database and then being able to proactively kind of feed that back to the customer once when they come back. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. What we will do, we'll include all of your kind of details in the show notes. We'll include a link to your book as well. I know that you've kind of that was recently published. So if anybody wants to know more about you and to read more about kind of what you do and how you help businesses, I'm sure they can read up in the book. But for now, Darshan, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Pleasure talking to you.